the hell that was.
You're absolutely right, okay, in your analysis. And let me just say, you know that I like you when I'm willing to sit through a podcast episode featuring Gavin Newsom just to prepare for this. Okay, because I can't stand him. I can't stand his raspy voice. And it's not for any superficial reason other than the fact that I live in California. I've had the displeasure.
I saw. Yeah. What it looked to me like he was negotiating with a deaf prostitute.
Many believe they have Gavin Newsom neatly defined, from his polished appearance to his confident delivery and ever-present campaign grin. That perception shifts when Ana Kasparian and Tyrus step in, reframing the moment and disrupting the carefully managed image. What initially appears to be another heated political exchange gradually reveals something more uncomfortable and unexpectedly telling. As the sheen fades, the encounter exposes contradictions beneath the surface, creating an unusually revealing moment. By the conclusion, a clear question lingers: was the moment unintentional, or did someone finally voice what is usually left unsaid?
At the talent in the Democratic Party right now, people are going to get mad at me for saying this, but I genuinely feel there isn't much. Like I don't know who the next leader of this party is going to be. Everyone is kind of singing the praises of Gavin Newsom. I live in California. He's the governor here. He's a disaster of epic proportions.
As the discussion unfolds, viewers are encouraged to stay engaged as the focus shifts to the contrast between Gavin Newsom's well-practiced self-assurance and the carefully maintained image surrounding his political persona. Into that setting step Ana Kasparian and Tyrus, approaching the exchange without deference or pretense. Rather than reinforcing the established narrative, they challenge it directly, refusing to validate appearances they see as artificial. Their intervention cuts through the polished presentation, reframing the moment and drawing attention to what they suggest is a constructed image rather than an unquestioned reality.
Watch the tape. Yes! He literally goes, I want some of this, then you do some of this, and I'll do some of that back to you, and then we'll do this, and then I'll pay you, and then we'll do it again.
True.
And then she kept saying, no. Okay, how about this? You do this one first, then we do this one, then we give a little back and forth.
The atmosphere shifted almost immediately, not through heightened theatrics, but as facts quietly took center stage and could not be dismissed. The exchange moved away from the rhythms of a typical political argument and into a measured examination of a long-standing narrative. What unfolded was a deliberate, step-by-step reassessment, steadily unpacking assumptions that had gone largely unchallenged for years and altering the direction of the conversation.
Again, has cost the state more than $3.75 billion. So that's the exact figure. And in the 5 years that this program has been in place, homelessness has only gotten worse, which is a pretty clear sign that it's not working. So it's been in place since 2020. Homelessness in California has skyrocketed in the 5 years HomeKey has been in place, growing by more than 20%, according to the Public Policy Institute of California. That's an increase of some 36,000 people between 2019 and 2024.
Ana Kasparian addressed Gavin Newsom with a measured skepticism that appeared restrained on the surface but quickly penetrated the polished presentation surrounding his leadership. Without relying on dramatic declarations, her approach allowed inconsistencies to emerge naturally. One by one, questions surrounding Newsom's record and public image came into view, shifting attention away from style and toward substance as the discussion progressed.
2014, voters in California overwhelmingly supported a ballot measure to support building more reservoirs in the state in order to bulk up our water infrastructure because we live in a drought-prone state. That passed in 2014. Funding was attached to it. You want to know how many reservoirs have been built since 2014? Zero. This state is an utter joke because of the people.
Tyrus entered the discussion with the tone of someone no longer persuaded by a familiar performance, bringing a bluntness that shifted the dynamic. Alongside Ana Kasparian, the conversation took on a steady cadence, transforming the exchange from confrontation to close examination. Moments of humor emerged as Gavin Newsom's image of confident optimism collided with outcomes that failed to align. Kasparian highlighted how refined rhetoric can drift far from the everyday realities it claims to address, while Tyrus underscored the contrast between inspiring leadership language and measurable conditions on the ground. The reaction was not driven by mockery, but by the clear and widening divide between stated intentions and observable results.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. He's still governor, right?
Yes.
So he could do something about it. That's the most irritating thing, is like, why did anyone say with a follow-up where he's like, the homeless situation is ridiculous? Follow-up question, aren't you governor?
Yeah.
Like, that's the difference. That's the difference between the radical left and President Trump. He'll talk about something as it's being taken care of. He's going to go up and say, listen, I'm going to sign an executive order to stop homelessness. Here's how we're going to do it.
As the discussion progressed, Gavin Newsom's carefully cultivated image began to appear less intact, maintaining its surface appeal while showing signs of strain. Ana Kasparian's observations carried weight because she presented the inconsistencies as recurring themes rather than isolated errors. Tyrus reinforced that assessment with a direct tone that signaled diminishing tolerance for familiar explanations. The humor sharpened as both treated these contradictions as long-standing characteristics that had escaped scrutiny. Without resorting to exaggerated outrage, they methodically examined Newsom's leadership approach, keeping the focus on substance over spectacle. The conversation avoided framing figures as heroes or villains, instead highlighting how image-making can overshadow responsibility when presentation is rewarded more than outcomes. Gradually, Newsom's reputation for confidence became a quiet source of irony, revealing how refined messaging can coexist with unresolved challenges. As policy results entered the discussion, the irony became more pronounced, underscoring how claims of success can shift as definitions quietly change.
Gavin Newsom's leadership in California has been a complete and utter disaster. As a Californian, I 100% have experienced he's out to lunch, right? Like, he changes his ideology depending on what he thinks is fresh and what's hip at any given moment. 76% of Californians voted in favor of something known as Prop 36, which is to roll back some of the soft on crime policies. That requires funding. He has been pushing back against adequately funding the efforts to essentially...
As the exchange continued, attention turned to the gap between Gavin Newsom's carefully constructed narrative and the realities on the ground, a contrast Tyrus highlighted with pointed clarity. The humor resonated because it mirrored frustrations many encounter daily, giving voice to concerns long left unspoken. Newsom's leadership approach emerged as an example of how presentation can eclipse performance, with Ana Kasparian stressing that appearing effective does not guarantee real results. Tyrus extended that point, describing a political style that has run so long it now assumes approval without question. Sarcasm surfaced naturally as both underscored how political achievement is often measured by headlines rather than tangible progress. The discussion avoided extremes, neither vilifying Newsom nor placing him beyond critique. Kasparian approached the subject with weariness rather than surprise, framing the issues as familiar and draining. That blend of frustration and focus sharpened the commentary, especially as economic conditions entered the conversation. Their optimistic messaging clashed with lived experience, a disconnect Kasparian described as leadership guided more by internal counsel than by measurable outcomes.
The left's money schemes where the guy who's in charge is saying, we need help, we need to figure out a way to do this. So they're going to make a committee. They already have bubonic plague in California. I remember Dr. Drew was going, there's bubonic plague back in California. Wow. I grew up in California. I will not bring my kids back to my neighborhood because I don't feel like walking through, as you affectionately call, hobos, drug addicts and pedophiles and criminals who hide there because it's a great place to hide and commit crimes. So he could do something. He doesn't want to do something. He's just saying to see if American people are stupid enough to fall.
Ana Kasparian emphasized that confidence alone does not address rising costs or resolve deep structural challenges, prompting a sharper response rooted in shared experience rather than exaggeration. The discussion shifted as accountability took center stage, exposing how even the most refined narratives strain under scrutiny. Kasparian noted that Gavin Newsom's achievements are often amplified, while shortcomings are softened through careful language. Tyrus added that leadership credibility erodes when responsibility is treated as optional. As this pattern became clear, the tone grew more pointed. Their focus on Newsom's ambition combined skepticism with irony, portraying it as notable yet increasingly detached from day-to-day governance. Kasparian observed that future-oriented promises can divert attention from present obligations, while Tyrus highlighted the contradiction of pursuing new goals before completing existing commitments. The commentary framed ambition as a mixed asset rather than an automatic strength. As the exchange continued, the critique resembled a necessary reassessment rather than an attack. Newsom's polished image faced pressure from measurable results, with the humor emerging from the tension between confident messaging and unyielding facts.
Place an addict in a room alone where no one can administer Narcan. So these flaws existed within the Project Homekey program from the very beginning. And no one has really cared about fixing it, right? Because you can have a really good idea, but you're going to run into issues and you have to recalibrate. The problem was, according to audits that were done on this program, there was no effort to recalibrate. In fact, there's been no tracking of whether or not these programs work to begin with.
As the focus turned to public perception, Ana Kasparian noted that Gavin Newsom's image crafting often appears more refined than the outcomes it is meant to represent. Tyrus added that excessive polish can signal vulnerability rather than confidence, particularly when real-world conditions disrupt the narrative. The humor resonated by highlighting how repeated messaging can normalize contradictions when they go unchallenged. Their goal was not to score points, but to recalibrate expectations. Newsom's leadership was presented not as an exception, but as part of a broader political pattern in which style advances faster than substance. The tone invited viewers to recognize trends instead of choosing sides. As the exchange continued, the commentary brought a sense of clarity. Newsom's confidence, once viewed as an asset, began to resemble a barrier to scrutiny. Kasparian and Tyrus methodically stripped that away through consistency rather than confrontation, allowing inconsistencies to surface on their own. By the closing moments, the humor felt unavoidable. Once patterns are identified, they lose their cover. Newsom's narrative no longer appeared complex, but familiar and increasingly clear, leaving the audience with observations that were difficult to dismiss.
Me, when I signed on to criminal justice reform, what I thought I was signing on to was we're going to reform our prisons. But the idea of, oh, we're just not going to punish anyone for pretty much anything is not what I thought I was signing up for. But that's pretty much what we've gotten. And preemptively shutting down, 4 to 5 state prisons without really having a plan in place for what happens to oftentimes violent inmates was a disastrous idea by Gavin Newsom, to be honest.
As the discussion eased, there was no dramatic conclusion or rallying cry, only the lasting impression of a carefully crafted narrative facing sustained examination. Gavin Newsom remained unchanged, but public perception appeared altered. Tyrus left the exchange without anger, introducing a more challenging takeaway for political image-making: confidence without follow-through can gradually become a liability. That message resonated because Ana Kasparian and Tyrus did not present Newsom as an anomaly, but as a clear illustration of how political performance can thrive even as its foundation weakens. The humor worked by treating contradictions as long-accepted norms rather than sudden revelations. Kasparian methodically guided viewers through those inconsistencies with restraint, while Tyrus contributed commentary reflecting the fatigue that sets in when patience wears thin. Newsom's tendency toward broad, aspirational rhetoric took on a sharper edge when placed against timelines that remain unmet. Kasparian also noted how messaging often seeks approval over accountability, a strategy effective until the applause stops. Tyrus reinforced that view, warning that praise is a risky benchmark when it comes from audiences removed from the real-world impact of the policies being applauded.
The Democratic Party's not going anywhere because we only have 2 options.
Yeah.
So even doesn't matter. We've been around forever. Yeah, because both parties do a good job of keeping a third party out.
Right.
So you won't see any. So what they do is every once in a while they change their face. So the Democratic Party was overtaken by activists and wannabe terrorists. Because it's funny because and this is the difference between the 2 parties. When Republicans are losing and being attacked, i.e. when Facebook was taking everything you say, your rights away, when you said the wrong.
The reaction that followed was not driven by ridicule, but by recognition, as many viewers have witnessed similar patterns emerge around other leaders with comparable outcomes. The exchange illustrated how Gavin Newsom's confidence appears to intensify as discussions grow more abstract, standing out most when results are framed in theory rather than in practice. Ana Kasparian noted that abstraction can shield narratives from uncomfortable specifics, while Tyrus emphasized that credibility depends on those very details. The humor resonated because clarity poses a challenge only to narratives unable to withstand it. As the critique continued, Kasparian and Tyrus presented Newsom's leadership as an example of how political momentum can persist through repetition instead of resolution. Sarcasm surfaced as they highlighted the recycling of familiar language, refreshed just enough to sound new while leaving unresolved issues untouched. That sense of familiarity was evident to the audience, strengthening the impact of the commentary. Underlying it all was an observation that Newsom's public image appears designed to convey inevitability, suggesting confidence in place of genuine agreement.
AIPAC. And it's interesting, you're like the first to bring up AIPAC in years.
Is it interesting? Okay, that was California Governor Gavin Newsom malfunctioning as he was being asked a question
that he didn't expect and didn't really seem prepared to answer. Now, Newsom malfunctioned and said the word interesting a total of 8 times after he was confronted on the topic of AIPAC.
In closing, Ana Kasparian challenged the notion of inevitability, noting that confidence often appears unshakable only until it is tested. Tyrus reinforced that point, underscoring that reality remains the ultimate measure. As sustained scrutiny shifted the focus toward accountability, the humor grew more pointed. Their examination of Gavin Newsom avoided spectacle, instead reflecting frustration with narratives that ask for patience without delivering progress. The commentary resonated because it framed that frustration as measured and understandable. Laughter became a way to acknowledge disappointment without sliding into cynicism. As the discussion concluded, Newsom's carefully constructed image appeared less imposing and more relatable, not through attack but through examination. Kasparian and Tyrus demonstrated that scrutiny need not be hostile to be effective, and that humor can be a powerful tool for revealing facts. The enduring takeaway was not outrage, but clarity. Confidence may attract attention, but consistency is what ultimately earns trust.